Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Becoming a Powerhouse Brand. Today, I've got the fabulous Sophie Lee from Electric Peach, and we are going to be diving into somatics in showing up as your true unapologetic self and just really taking center stage in your own life. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome Sophie onto the show. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So, Sophie and I, we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while now. And I actually met Sophie for the first time in person at Samantha Harmon's event last month in October. And just hearing Sophie's story, her journey, how she got started, I had full on goosebumps. And I just knew I needed to have Sophie on the show today. So, Sophie, for those listening that don't know who you are, could you give us a whistle stop tour into your kind of background and how you got started in like where you are now?
Sure. Where to start? So I started my career at Disney in Shanghai when I was in my very, very early 20s in internal communications. And then Shanghai being what it was at the time, it was like city full of possibility. And I was an audacious 22-year-old and decided that I was going to be a journalist and basically pestered my way into becoming a columnist at Shanghai Daily by just showing up there every day until they relinquished a column to me. And that was the start of my journalism career, which led me to lots of really interesting different insights and parts of Shanghai and China, wider China, and then to the UK, where I did my NCTJ and officially fully trained in the craft, the trade of journalism. And then I realized that I really did not want to be a journalist in the UK because it is a pariah industry and they literally teach you how to do the death knock and go to people's houses when they have just lost somebody and try to extrapolate as much pain and misery from people as you possibly can, because as we all know, misery sells.
Yeah.
So I then transitioned from journalism into business journalism and was working in a finance company, specifically using the tools of journalism to tell the story of the small business community in the UK from a perspective of finance and business growth. So that gave me a really interesting understanding of business, particularly small business, because this country, our economy is largely made up of small businesses, even though you'd never think it because we don't get any support
Yeah.
whatsoever for holding the economy up. But it gave me a lot of love for business. And I then moved into agency, started working in brand and marketing, and worked for some massive organizations like L'Oreal, Universal Studios, EasyJet, and then started my own business 8.5 years ago, specifically working in brand storytelling for purpose-driven companies because I got so burnt out by the marketing industry, the brand and sales industry, and saw how much from being a journalist all the way to being a brand specialist and marketer, how much communication is used to manipulate people, to make people think there's something wrong with them so that they buy something that they don't need. That's essentially
Yeah.
capitalism in a nutshell. And I thought, well, if communication can be used in that way, then it could be used for positive impact as well. And in fact, we need that to be the case for businesses. So now, and for the last 8.5 years, I've been working with organizations and founders to help them tell stories that galvanize people to take action, particularly in the context of environmental and social impact.
Love that. Love that. So, in terms of helping people, because I know you help with public speaking as well, like you've got a whole array of things that you can support with. In terms of taking things to that next level in you standing out, what did you find was that pivotal moment where you were like, okay, I'm not going to hide behind kind of my brand. I'm actually going to be my brand. What would you say was that pivotal moment in your own journey where that started to happen?
When I was an employee, I had no problem with being front and center. I realized quite early on way, way, way before personal brand was even a thing, that in order to get ahead, I had to be indispensable, and that I worked in an industry that cared about prestige and visibility. And therefore, in order to become an asset to the organizations that I was working for, I needed to make myself into a brand that they could leverage, really, for want of a better word. And I don't think any of it was conscious. I think it's that I just know how business works. And
Yeah.
because I've worked in the media for my whole career, I know how it works, to the value of being seen and how important that is. So for a long, long, long time, I was doing a lot of writing. I was writing for all of the major industry publications, getting links back to the agency that I was working for or the companies that I was working for. And I was also speaking on stages representing the companies that I was working for. And that just seemed like a no-brainer. It was just like oh, of course, that's what you do to get ahead in your career. It's funny to think how much personal brand is I absolutely hate the terminology personal brand,
Yeah.
and I have a bit of a problem with how many people who've never ever worked in brand are suddenly now personal brand specialists and
Yes.
honestly, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's like they've gone to a few like courses, and now they're selling programs, basically
Yeah.
regurgitating what other people have said, and it bothers me quite a lot. We could go into a
Oh
whole
my
whole
God.
nother
Yeah.
thing around
That's going
that.
to be a whole other episode.
Yeah, it's so fun. Isn't it so frustrating?
Yeah.
Um, so, but when I started my business, and I'll never forget the moment, because it was the last day of my career, my employed career. I never want to be employed again. So hopefully it's the last ever day that I was an employee. And I was sat at my desk, surrounded by cards and this whole future ahead of me. And I just had this sudden, overwhelming feel of existential dread, like, who the hell do I think I am? And I've never had that before. I've always actually just been quite bolshy and audacious. Like, not that I've definitely struggled with believing in myself in other areas, but when it came to my career and content and writing and communications, I've just naturally always been good at it. So I've never questioned myself in that way. But then suddenly I had to do everything for myself, like find business and create a business. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And at that point was when I suddenly started to feel really, really underconfident. And it just hit like that. And people call that imposter syndrome, but I don't think we need to pathologize ourselves with that. It's actually just a very normal response to putting ourselves out of our comfort zone
Yeah.
and not knowing what we're doing and having to figure it out for ourselves. And also there being a lot at stake, because you're doing this thing and you have to make it work.
Yeah.
So that was when I first started to really shrink myself in terms of how I showed up. It was like the opposite reaction. And because it felt like there was so much more at stake, I got in my own head for years and suddenly started to hide behind my brand, which at the time was called The Joyful and is now Electric Peach. And I talk about doing the turtle. It would be like 1 minute I'd be out, and be like, I'm here. And then it would feel really scary and I would hide again
Yeah.
over and over. And I really struggled to become consistently visible outside of my immediate community, which is where we got most of our work from in Brighton. And that had a massive impact, not only on the ability to grow our business, but also on how I saw myself as a leader. It was very weird identity crisis. Well, it wasn't weird, it was completely normal actually, but it was weird for me because I'd never experienced something like that before. It was like my identity became very, very confused as soon as
Yeah.
I stepped out of employment.
Yeah. I think it's that because I come from a similar background in that I was in brand and marketing for such a long time. But you can do that. You literally live and breathe that work. So you do know what to do. But yeah, when it's all on your own shoulders and it's shit, I am my business. Like I'm the one that's got to get the work in and I've got to stand out. It's like a
Yeah,
completely different ball game, isn't it? So it's really interesting when I speak to somebody else that comes from a similar background that went through exactly the same thing. And it is like you say, it's just part of the process. It kind of doesn't matter what you've done previously, when you become a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, or you're the face of your brand, it's a scary move. It really is scary to take up center stage.
It really is. And I think it's a good thing in a way, even though it's really uncomfortable, because it shows you've got skin in the game. Like it
Yeah.
shows that you care. And suddenly you're having to figure out so many different things at the same time as being the face of your business. And I always say that there's no greater self-development program than running your own business. And it's so true because you have to come up really face to face with all of the ways that you are limiting yourself and all of the
Yeah.
really pesky self limiting beliefs. And I knew from quite early on that I was standing in my own way, but I had absolutely no idea how to get out of my own way. It was that real
Yeah.
frustrating feeling of this is on me, but I don't know how to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about, because I know we've talked very briefly before this episode around somatics, when did you start introducing
Mhm.
somatics into your own personal brand and kind of scaling your business, like the embodiment and really leaning into our intuition, understanding what our bodies are telling us at all times, and really becoming that energetic match for what we're calling in has been a huge part of my own journey. I'd love to know
Mm.
how you started embracing it yourself as your part of your journey.
I came into contact with somatics when I first went into recovery from addiction, which was probably about 2 years into running my business. And I realized that I needed to sort myself out. Otherwise, to be honest, I was going to destroy myself, let alone destroy my business. And I took on every single kind of therapy that you could possibly imagine. I had the classic talk therapy, I had a shaman banging a drum and a feather and lots of incense around me and like pulling apart my caged heart and all of these different like
Figuring it
energetic
out, it's in there somewhere.
yeah, yeah. And it was really I'm not somebody who does anything by halves, and it was probably quite like a frantic like approach to sorting out what was fundamentally not wrong with me. It was a fundamental belief in my own worthiness that was creating destructive patterns in my behavior. And the one thing that made the biggest difference was somatics and coming into my body. And I realized how much of my life I had spent literally just from the neck up, like no connection to my body whatsoever. Really didn't know anything about nervous system regulation or all of the ways that my behavior was because of being unsafe or feeling unsafe. And this is the thing that actually I think is really important because people talk about people pleasing like it's some kind of personality defect. And it's a nervous system response. It's the fawn response. And I had that so much, no boundaries, constantly like, please tell me I'm worthy, please tell me
Yeah.
I'm lovable. And that was a big thing that it was illuminated. It took a lot of time and it still does take a lot of work to shift those behaviors because they're so deeply ingrained. But when I started to understand everything from the nervous system upwards, rather than from my brain can control everything downwards, I started to understand myself so much better and also have a lot more compassion for other people and why people behave the way they do and that actually a lot of our behavior is subconscious and we're not deliberately trying to be a dick. It's just happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, so when I started to think about that, and then I started to think about all of the ways that I was giving quite bad advice. Like I would say, just show up. Like it was just so easy.
Yeah.
And I believed it. Like I did. I thought like that was what you have to do. You just have to think your way through this and power your way through this and realize that that's not helpful advice if your nervous system is telling you that everything around you is unsafe. And being visible is by its nature, if you think about where humans have evolved from, it is unsafe from an ancestral perspective in terms of being putting yourself out there and being seen by a potential predator, but also potentially being kicked out of the tribe. So it's an existential threat. But then on top of that, as women, our ancestors for thousands of years have been punished or killed for being visible, for
Yeah.
speaking up, for being unpalatable, which
Yeah.
is
Having a
interestingly what
voice,
my
isn't
book
it?
is about. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to have a voice as a woman, and you haven't been for thousands and thousands of years, and you're still not really. Like, and that's a really important thing, I think, because we're told we can have it all, but we don't have the conditions whatsoever to facilitate even remotely having some of it all, not even let alone it all.
Yeah.
So when I started to realize that, and I started to think, like, this is something that I really want to bring into my work, and then I went and got trained in somatics, trauma-informed somatics, and now I bring it into everything that I do because I do really, really, really like the transformation of the women that I work with is humongous, but only because of the fact that we're looking at it from the nervous system first response, not from a mindset response, not from a strategic response, but like nervous system first and then layer on the rest after that. And that's what makes people feel like that they're resourced, then they can show up
Yeah.
and they know how to regulate themselves when the inevitable happens because we're human and we are going to have a response sometimes. We know how to handle that as we move forward.
100%. And I always like to talk about, because I work with a lot of women that are scaling their business. So they've kind of probably done a lot of that inner work. And I always talk about inside out branding, where they focused on their nervous system, their inner like confidence before they then start being visible on the exterior. But when
Mhm.
they're scaling, it is this whole level, new devil, isn't there? It opens up this
Yeah.
whole new realm. So when you think you've done this work, there's like a whole new lot to
You're
tap
never
into.
done.
Yeah.
You're never done. And do you find it like, do you ever ask yourself, like, why do I just keep, why can't I just be like, okay,
I
cool, done now,
know.
rather than having to go to the next level. But I'm guessing the women that you work with are similar to the women I work with who are really, they're driven, they have big ideas, they have big goals, they're not going to let themselves stand in their own way. And they need some help with doing that in a way that's healthy and not going to burn them out.
Yeah.
And that's really the key thing, because if you don't pay attention to your nervous system and the signals that it is telling you, that your body is telling you, that's data. We need to respond to that. Otherwise, it will just keep screaming at us and screaming at us. And if we don't listen, it will find some other way to
Yeah.
make us listen. And that's when injury happens or illness happens or burnout happens.
Yeah, 100%. And I always like to remind people as well that we're all different. So what will work really well for one person might not work for somebody else. And it's so easy, particularly in the online space, to see the huge celebrations, the huge wins, the amazing launches and everything that someone else has had, and not necessarily compare yourself, but just think, okay, well, I must need those goals, and almost put this person on a pedestal. And I see and hear it all the time. But
Yeah.
when you come back and think, work out, what do you want? Like, what do you actually want? What life do you want to create? What business do you want to have? And
Yeah.
actually focus on you as an individual. It might be very different to what you're seeing plastered all over the online space.
Yeah. And as we both know, the online space is full of utter bullshit. Also, I was smiling because how to tell someone who actually knows what they're talking about in brand and marketing is saying one size doesn't fit all. Like these wild, like, steal my framework and
Like,
teaching of like get to six figures and promises that are absolutely impossible to actually deliver on because unless you know somebody's business and their goals and their life and their audience and how well they deliver on their promise, you cannot possibly guarantee that kind of results. And
yeah,
it's why people keep getting burnt and hate marketing.
yeah, 100%. I could not agree with you more. And the whole framework thing, don't even go there.
Like I have my framework that I use with my clients, but I'm never being like, steal mine and then
Yeah,
use it
exactly. This
yourself.
is going
But
to
like,
work for you.
so yeah, I find it really interesting. And I have so many conversations where people are literally like their brain's about to explode with all of this contradictory advice because everybody's saying something like it's like it's gospel, and
Yeah.
it's you have to do this, otherwise you're going to fail, and it's complete rubbish.
Yeah. I'd love to just ask you quickly, actually, how do you feel like AI has become such a huge thing? It's a huge tool. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger, better, like more advanced and everything. How do you feel about people almost relying on it in terms of standing out as a personal brand? Because obviously, like your own brand is you, it's literally a reflection of you. And I know you can train all of the AI to sound like you, but how do you feel about those that are kind of, it's a blatant copy and paste job in terms of content?
I watched a talk recently where the woman who's an AI expert was talking about how AI should be 20% you at the beginning, 60% the machine, 20% you at the end. So you put your stuff into it, let it do its thing, and then you amend it at the end. And I think it's got to be more like 40% you at the beginning, 40% AI, 20% edits at the end. I don't think you should ever outsource more of yourself to it
Yeah.
than you put into it. And it's definitely really useful. Like if you were, for example, going to record yourself answering some questions and put the transcription into it and ask it to help you pull out social posts using your own voice and your own insights, I'm really here for using it in that way. If you say, write me a post about storytelling with no of your insights at all, then it's just not, it's gonna be empty sounding. And actually, even when you train it on your own voice, it doesn't ever sound like you.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you can always tell. But the other thing that I am seeing more and more is people taking other people's content, popping it into AI and getting it to like do an amalgamation. And because I use quite specific terminology and sometimes just make up my own words, it's really obvious when somebody's trying to like steal my like I'm just like, I've never heard anyone say it exactly like that before. And it's interesting that you, who's in my space, have now started to speak like that. And that I think is a real shame because we all have our own brilliance, and our brilliance is uniquely ours. And we also have our own stories, we have our own expertise and insights that we can bring that make our offering rich and unique. If we're trying to steal from somebody else, it tells me insecurity of the person doing it.
Yeah.
And also, it's robbing yourself of the opportunity to really see what you are capable of within your own brilliance. So I think it's a great tool, but I definitely don't see it replacing actual expertise anytime soon. And the other thing as well to bear in mind is if you're using AI to think for you and you don't actually know what you're talking about, when it comes to the point that you're working, whether it's coaching, consultancy, whatever it might be, there will come a point somebody will ask you a question that you don't actually know the answer to. And either you'll make it up or it will become really obvious that you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I see that quite a lot. I've seen quite a lot of really, really terrible advice that if you work in the industry like we have for your whole career and somebody gives that kind of advice, you immediately know.
Yeah.
There's no way that you would give that advice if you actually knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that for me is very problematic because these people are often really good at being loud, really good at putting
Yeah.
themselves out there as like the oracle of something. And people believe it. And then they outsource their voice to that. And then they outsource their decisions to that. And they give them money. And then it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's so frustrating to see. And I think, like you say, bringing in your own story is like the best way that you can do it because that's what's going to make you stand out. That's what's going to help you to resonate with your target audience. Like I've had so many people that have come to me for my services and offers because of things I've talked about in my own personal journey that nobody else would have. And I think it's so important to
Yeah.
bring that in to how you're showing
Yeah.
up.
100%. One of my clients that turned into a six-figure client came to me because they had heard me talking about my experience with addiction. So you think certain things would put people off. I used to think anyway that certain things about my past needed to be hidden because it would put people off or ruin my career. And since I've got out of that, not only do I own my story more and own my own self in all of my messy, multifaceted human glory, I also attract people based on that story in a way that I never ever thought would be possible.
It's like it's rewriting what we've been taught, isn't it? Because I think when you're particularly in your mid to late teens, you're taught this is how you should dress for an interview, this is how you should perform, this is how you should behave, like this is the correct way of pronouncing things. And you're kind of brainwashed into thinking if you don't fit into that criteria, you're not good enough. Or like you say about the addiction side of things, like you could very easily, as most people would, think, well, I can't talk about that because that's going to put people off. But all it does is draw
Mm,
people in that can
mhm.
totally resonate and see, oh my God, if she's gone from this to this, look at that transformation. I want to work with that person. And also to understand that you get who they are and where they're at now. Like, how
Yeah,
amazing is that?
yeah, and I think that the other thing with that as well is there's so much bullshit, like we've said, out there that it's really refreshing to have somebody tell the truth, even if the truth isn't particularly savory.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, okay, well, there's someone that I can trust then.
Yeah.
And in our industry, trust is so important. And I think that's more than anything why I have such a bee in my bonnet about the charlatans out there because they ruin the industry. And at the same time, those of us who do walk our talk stand out more. Those of us who aren't using ChatGPT to create our entire content plan stand out more.
Yeah.
Actually, now I'm loving seeing grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes. And I used to be like really hot on it, like judgy if I saw that. Now I love it because I'm like, oh, this shows me that you wrote that. That's really
Yeah.
nice.
There are a lot of spelling mistakes in my stuff.
Great.
um,
Some of mine are like quite, yeah, same. And I think that again, I'm not judging use of AI at all. I think I use it. I think it's a great tool, but it has to be used as a tool in the same way that any other program,
yeah.
automation, whatever it might be that we use is a tool.
Yeah. 100%. It's there to help you, isn't it? Not to do it for you.
Exactly.
What is next for you, Sophie? What can we look out for? Have you got any exciting plans as we're like nearly the end of 2025? I don't know how that's happened. What is coming up?
Have I ever, Jackie? Wow, 2026 is my most exciting year yet. I have my book launching on the 8th of March. It's called Beyond Palatable, a Manifesto for Unapologetic Women, which
Yes,
you can pre-order now on all major bookshops, which is insane to me. Like it's already on Guardian Bookshop, Waterstones, Blackwell's.
that is mad.
Um,
Amazing.
it's mad. So that launches, and I go on tour of the UK throughout March. Different. I've got obviously I don't like I said I don't do anything by half, so I'm going literally around the whole UK, Scotland down to Brighton. And then I've also got my new offer, Speakers Corner, launching, which is a monthly subscription for women who want to take to the stage and use their voice and tell their story with more impact. And I'm going to be speaking on quite a lot of stages at different events that probably your audience will be at. So
Amazing.
they will, which I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but there's quite a few. I'm booked in quite a few different places next year, so they might even get to hear my very passionate perspective of why women need to stop apologizing for their voice and start taking up space.
Amazing. That is such a good way to end this episode. Please do click the links in the show notes below where you can go and follow Sophie, go and check out the pre-orders for the book, the big book. I feel like you're doing like your own eras tour next year then.
Kind of am. It's the unapologetic era. Um,
I love it. I'm so here. So good.
yeah, it's really exciting.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode today, Sophie. If you've listened to this episode and you've really enjoyed it, please do reach out to Sophie and myself, leave a review on here, and make sure that you go and grab that pre-order copy of the book.
Yes,
Thanks,
please do.
Sophie.
It was lovely to see you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.